Hey everybody, welcome back to Sama, Sisters Against Mental Abuse. I'm your host, Misty, and today on the show we have Chanelle. We're trying a little bit of something new. It's a shorter episode. It's more of a Q&A kind of thing. Again, thanks so much to Chanelle for coming on the show, and let's get right into it.
Well, I have a background in education. I've been involved in writing before and also creative writing and journalism. I'm still involved in education right now.
If you want, we can kind of just jump into the start of this. What was the situation, where you met him, and
We went to the same school, but I really started talking with him when I was in high school. And by this time, he had already graduated from high school. And so we just started off as friends. At that time, I wasn't like interested in being in a relationship. I guess he was trying to pursue me. And so, like, he would call me every day and check on me, see how my day was. And so, I guess just from there, like, it turned into a romantic situation. But what really happened was like he ended up leaving to join the military, and then when he came back, he ended up getting discharged after like a year. And so when he came back, that's when he was showing that he was interested in me romantically.
And so, like, at that point, you weren't interested in him, or how did that go? Because it sounds like he was making himself a presence, like he was kind of pursuing you. How did you feel about that at the time?
At the time, I was not looking to be in a relationship because I had like been single for a whole year, and so I was just more like focused on school, focused on like my extracurricular activities because I was involved in writing at the time. So we were like traveling, doing workshops and things like that. So I wasn't really interested in a relationship at the time.
Did you kind of communicate this and he kept going, or, eh, because at some point I guess you became attracted to him. So what did that look like?
Well, I guess I just got used to like his presence and talking to him every day. And then, after a while, I guess I felt like I needed his presence in my life.
At this point, you were kind of doing your own thing. And then after he came back from the military is kind of when he started pursuing you.
hmm
So eventually he wears you down and you start the relationship. So what did the relationship look like at the beginning?
Like at the beginning, I guess you can consider it as like a love bombing stage because at the beginning, he was nice, he was like considerate, like he was telling me the things that I wanted to hear, asking me how my day was and like basically not showing any negative signs.
Okay, so then was there a particular point where things went left?
Well, it still took like a long time for things to go left because, well, what happened was when I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter, we did kind of go our separate ways, but there still wasn't like I think that's mostly when like the mental abuse started. Is like when I was pregnant with my daughter, but there was still like no physical abuse at the time.
Okay, so take me through this. So the beginning, things were great, and then you guys got married, and then you were pregnant, and then I guess what did that look like, or when did things start changing? When did he start showing you who he really was?
Well, actually, we weren't married. We didn't get married yet. Like we like first I got pregnant with my daughter, and then that's like when the mental abuse like started showing. But like it was so many. It was like a couple years more of just like being together, not being together, and then like we ended up getting married. But like yeah, when I got pregnant with my daughter, that's when my mental abuse started showing.
Okay, so you were already on and off. The relationship was an on and off again kind of situation, or
Yeah, it
okay, so
was
you
yeah.
I got you. So you're on and off, and then you got pregnant, and then you fast forward to you being married. I guess what were some of the red flags that you remember?
Well, in the beginning, the red flags were like he had a lot of female friends, which I'm not saying this is a red flag, but he it seemed like he was always trying to compare me to other women, and then just his past with his ex, I guess that would be considered a red flag, but at the time I didn't like think it was a red flag, but like how he treated his ex, and like there was physical abuse in that relationship and probably mental too. I'm not sure about the mental abuse. At that time, I wasn't thinking that was a red flag because I was just like isolating that as like, okay, that was a situation with him and this other person. And I was thinking that with me, it would be different.
Oh, okay. So he was physically abusive in his last relationship, like before you?
Yeah.
And like, how did you find that out?
Well, he actually told me, like, he told me that he had pushed her before, and so I guess because see, when all of this was like developing and all this was happening, like I was still a teenager, so I don't think that I really, well, I probably didn't because I now knowing what I know about psychology and knowing about the brain and how cognitive skills develop. Like I probably didn't have the skills to like process making good decisions or whatever. But at that time, I wasn't thinking that that was something that would affect me. I didn't think that it was like related to me.
So what kind of situations happened to you with him? Because like I want to get an idea of like what it looked like because I know that mental abuse can be so many different things. And you
Mm-hmm.
said that it escalated, things got bad when you were pregnant because they do say that when a woman is pregnant and she's with someone who's abusive, that is the most vulnerable time for her. So
Mm-hmm.
what kind of situations did you run into? When did you realize something was wrong?
Well, there was like one situation where he was like driving erratically in the car. I was pregnant at the time, and then like I think he made a comment that he would push me out of the car, but like he never did. But he was saying that he could, and it may not seem abusive, but yeah, it is.
Yeah, and that's the scary part because
Yeah.
it sounds like he already tried to paint him. I could be wrong here. I could be missing the mark, but like it sounds like he tried to paint himself. He tried to paint himself as being honest because like he came to you and told you about the physical abuse, and I feel
Yeah.
like when they do that, we start to kind of trust them, and I think that they know that.
Hmm.
So it sounds like a big giant mind game. So during this time, while you were with him, you told me that the mental abuse had escalated and that there was a cycle. Like it already sounds like a cycle when you were breaking up and getting back together. But I think that you told me before there was a cycle where you would have these issues and he would love bomb you, and then how you would break up with him and he would pretend like it didn't happen. Can you like tell us more and maybe kind of what you learned from that or what it looked like?
Well, what would happen would be like, okay, so we would have the issues and then we would break up, but then he would do all these things to like try to get me back. Then once we got back together, in psychology they call this the honeymoon cycle, like it would only last for so long, like him being nice to me, and then like the abuse would start again.
So one of the things about you is that you are someone who researched and you started reading about narcissistic abuse. So give us a couple situations like where you may have analyzed it and you were like, okay, like being able to put a name to it.
Mhm. Well, like basically, the discard thing. Like when I got pregnant, he basically discarded me because he did not want me to go through with the pregnancy. So it was a situation where like I didn't follow what he wanted, and so yeah, he discarded me. And so um I guess that's one of the only the main reasons. I mean, one of the only reasons, I mean, only times that he did like discarded me, but the time where when I would try to break up with him, he would not accept it. There was one time I tried to break up with him and he just called me back like the next day, like nothing ever happened.
All right, so we're at this point. You said that around the time that you were pregnant, it got really bad, and he was trying to discourage you because you weren't doing what he wanted. After that, what happens? Like you get back together and get married, or what happens after that?
Well, after like so long, well, once I had my child, he was saying that, we could just co-parent, and he like was picking her up, but like the whole time he still expected me like to have a sexual relationship with him. And so during that time, I still was involved with him sexually, but there were periods of times that I wasn't, but he was always pressing the issue. See, the thing about narcissists, they can discard you, but they don't like to be discarded.
Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, all right. But is this so when he tried to quote unquote co-parent with you, it turned into marriage? Is that what happened? Or
Yeah, it turned into marriage because the main reason why is because like he was being deployed, and a lot of people were telling me that, he then again he asked, it was like the third time he asked me to marry him. And a lot of people, were telling me that I should, you know, for financial reasons. And so I ended up doing that. And so and of course the whole time that we were engaged, it was like another love bombing situation because, he was deployed, but he gave me access to like all of his money, and he was letting me, buy whatever I wanted and stuff like that. And so, but now looking back, I feel like it was a love bombing situation.
oh yeah, I mean I hear that a
Yeah.
lot where they try to make you dependent on them. Does that mean that when he was deployed, he wasn't was he still controlling or abusive or anything like that when he was deployed or
Yes, he was. He was still controlling because I remember there was times like, especially on holidays. I remember Christmas time, I was around my family, and so like he expected anytime that he called, he expected me to like be on the phone with him and be on the phone with him as long as he wanted to. And so I remember Christmas, I was around my family, and but I still answered the call, but it was like I'm trying to tell him, okay, I need to get off the phone and like be around my family, but that's like I don't think that was something he wanted me to do. So,
oh, okay, okay, I see. So I guess since you mentioned people were pressuring you to marry him, it sounds like for the benefits, for military benefits, what did your support system look like going through this? Because you said that it was on and off, and then, he was, it sounds like he was controlling.
mhm.
Um,
I
hmm.
I really didn't have much of a support system because, like, to be honest, like the people that were around me, either they had like dealt with abuse and still not processed it, or they were basically not aware of like the cycle and everything. So it's kind of like it's not one of those situations where like, because I've heard some people that were in situations where they get hit and then their mom or their auntie tell them, okay, well that's just marriage, or that's just what you have to go through. It wasn't like someone blatantly telling me that that's what I had to go through, but it was kind of like an implied sense that it was just a struggle that.
You mentioned before that it did get physical. Could you kind of share like what happened and that transition from things being like mentally abusive to the physical and like what happened?
Well, this was actually before we got married, but it was like uh one of those times where we were living together. Well, he was basically living with me because I had just got my own place, like, and I had been staying there a few months, but he was living with me, and I had gave him a key. We had got into an argument. I forgot about what, and I asked him to give me my key back, and so I didn't think anything of it. I was headed to the kitchen to get something, and next thing I know, like he choked me from behind. And so like I blacked out. When I woke up, he was like on top of me.
What was going through your mind?
I was taken by surprise. Like, so I really, like at first, it was just I was taken by surprise. So like because that was the first time that it happened. But like then I woke up, but he was actually, I was like face down and he was like on my back, and so I was just survival. That was the only thing on my mind, in my mind, because I think I even, like, I remember calling my mom's name because like every time I get scared for some reason I'll call for my mom.
Okay, so then he did one of his love bombing things to kind of draw you back in.
Well, after that time, we were broken up for a long time because like I even told one of my friends about it, and now that person was supportive. I don't even, after that time, I think we didn't get back together. It probably was like at least a year or two.
So it was a long time in between.
Hmm.
Oh, okay, okay. I see.
And I think we didn't end up getting back together like right before he got deployed. Well, the reason I ended my marriage is because he ended up having a baby by somebody else. He got deployed, and so he came back in February, and then he had a baby in November.
Did you know or did you find out or did he tell you
He
or
he actually told me, but when he told me, it was like so many stages of him telling me because first he told me, and then he was saying that he didn't think it was his child, and then I think at one point he said it wasn't, and then when she was born, you know, I think he started, like, he was involved in her life some, but then he was still saying that he didn't think that it was his child, and so he ended up getting something from child support, and I guess he took the DNA test and it confirmed that it was his child. So.
you at that point you just said I'm done with this completely?
Hmm.
Okay. I want to go back and ask you about um you mentioned to me he really really did not take the breakup well. And I don't think that on the show we talked about post separation abuse.
Hmm.
Um but just I know that you told me he tried to like make your life hell. So after you decided that, hey, I'm not going to be abused anymore. I'm not going to deal with this anymore. What was the situation? What did it look like? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the first time that we broke up, which was after the situation where he choked me or whatever. Like I did have a restraining order, and but I think it was at one point he did like try to uh come to my apartment because somebody was knocking on my door like 4 in the morning. But he did tell me like a few years later that he was stalking me, and he said that he used to sit in my, sit in his car in the parking lot in my, apartment complex and watch to see if anybody was coming to my apartment, or not, which, I know stalking is like it's like a prerequisite for, and, not only an abusive situation, but like a femicide situation. But there was also one time where he called my job and he tried to get me fired. We like were still involved sexually, and like I was mostly involved because I knew that like he would retaliate against me if I didn't. And so like once I cut him off completely, that was a situation where he like retaliated against me because we had a child together. So he, you know, uh filed for custody for our child, and you know, it was the co-parenting was, I mean, it was no co-parenting. It was just a bitter custody battle.
And so, when you were reading about narcissism and all these different kinds of things, did you encounter anything about post separation abuse at all?
Well, I know like when it comes to the children, like the narcissists, they don't really care about the children, but they will use the children to hurt you. And that's one of the things that like he always did. It was to the point where he tried to portray me like as an abuser, or to portray me as an unfit parent when he was actually the one abusing the child.
Okay, so he was abusive to your daughter then. Was he like physically abusing her and then he would say that you were the one doing it, or
Well, no, he would do it. It was almost like he would do it in retaliation against me because the one time he told her, he was like, "Now go tell your mom that."
so at this point, where does this stand? Have you been able to move forward and get away from him? How's your daughter? How is your healing process?
We're all estranged from him. I worry about her healing process though, because I mean she doesn't um deal with him, but I went to therapy a few times, but she's went a few times too, but I want her to be involved in it, more continuously. But I guess my healing process is more just concerned about her because, you know, your parent is that's somebody that's supposed to protect you. It's not somebody you're supposed to be protected against. It's kind of hard dealing with that. I can talk about it, and then there are some people that say, "Well, you shouldn't talk about it." But I just feel like not only is it helping me, but I feel like it's probably going to help somebody else as well.
Gave you the strength to leave that relationship? And then once you left, how did you cope emotionally once you decided to sever ties with him?
But what helped me to leave was my child. We helped one another because through the whole process, at one point, we were still involved in going to court against him. It was to the point where, you know, and this is when like right after COVID started going on, and so we were going to court via Zoom, and my lawyer wanted her to testify, and she didn't want to do it, and she did not want to see him. Luckily, everything worked out with her not being able, but her not being able to do that. But one thing this whole situation has taught me is I want our legal system, from the lawyers, the judges, like even police officers, they're not trauma informed. And I've encountered so many people that, even the police, because one time he showed up at her job and the police said, oh, well, that's her dad. She needs to go with him. They're not considering, they're not trauma informed at all, because if a child sees a person and, they're showing signs of anxiety, they showing that they're scared, you don't send that child with that person. But there were so many times where, like, an officer or even the secretary at her school, you know, when I went to go check her out, she felt like she needed to call her dad first to see if it was okay. And at that point, he didn't even know what school she was going to. So by her calling him, she alerted him that she was going back to this school. And so I had to pull her out of that school, because it's like we were in a situation where we were trying to hide from him. And so what I saw is that so many people, like so many professions, they're not informed at all.
Closing, I want to ask, what kinds of advice do you have for other Black women that may not know that they're in a mentally abusive situation, or just general advice for other Black women, things that you've taken away from this?
Well, I will say this, like, generally, if it does not feel right, it probably is not right. And you can always, like, consult, like, a um, mental professional or anyone that's, like, trauma informed, that, can give you an objective view of what you're dealing with. Because, like, if you are experiencing mental abuse, the situation is not going to improve. So there is no reason to try to entertain it. And that's what I've seen in my experience.
And that concludes our episode for today. Thank you for joining us. If you are a Black woman who has a story to share about mental abuse, whether with family, romantic partner, friendship, or you are a Black woman in the mental health field, please reach out to us, samatogethernow@gmail.com. We are on Facebook as Sisters Against Mental Abuse, and we are also on Instagram at Sama Together Now. Thank you for joining us, and remember, mental abuse is abuse.